Alhamdulillah Rabb al-Alameen wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursaleen wa alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin wa ashabihi al-muntajabeen. We spoke of the necessity of having faith last week, and we stated faith marks that particular objective and goal towards which we direct our motion. We said that this life is a opportunity to inwardly discover ourselves and discover our God. And that seems to be the entirety of the objective in this world of ours. Iman depicted having a clear understanding of where we need to be, that God is the most complete and we need to move towards God, but not meeting with God in a place like the hereafter, but rather allowing the emergence of God from within us. So that was the whole discussion we had last week. Now, for this particular motion towards God to be actualized and fruitful, it has to be directed with a lot of resolve. There has to be this adamant attitude that I am moving towards my goal and I will not be deterred from this motion. The spiritual masters call this consistency and they call this stability. That in this motion, until and unless there is consistency and until and unless there is this perseverance and a resolute intention towards going to God, it will not work. Now, let's explain that a little bit. When we take on a physical journey, we might find that we are missing the comforts of our home, the luxuries, and that the travel is difficult. What that does is it makes us stop halfway and turn back and go home. On the other hand, the weather conditions are not good. We get frightened, get dismayed, or we just do not have the resolve to carry on. That is another thing that makes us stop and go backwards. At times, we are carrying too much luggage with us, and the car is straining, let us say, in moving forward. All of those things are encountered upon a physical journey, or may be encountered. The same is the case with the inner journey, coming out of the body and the bodily realm with which we have grown so accustomed to and that we identify with ourselves becomes very difficult. We too have baggages that restrain us from moving towards God. Because motion towards God means that I will not only pray and fast, but I will rely upon Allah. I will emulate God in every aspect of my life. I will forgive. I will let go. I will be charitable. I will address my inner greed, my anger. Now, when moving towards God, there are instances in which the past failures or past hurts overpower us. And at that point, we waver in our resolve to continue moving to God. If at this point we were to stop and take a backward step, then this will not be productive and the whole life might be spent in this way, never moving towards God. We take a couple of steps forward, then we retract and we reverse, and it becomes a regressive trend. Then after that, it becomes a habit of moving towards God, then stopping, then going back. As opposed to this, once we fix our objective, which is God, and we understand that God has to be revealed from within us, we become resolved that no matter what, I am going to continue with this motion. So now, when the thought of hurt comes into our mind, we need to throw this baggage outside of us. We need to leave that hurt behind, knowing full well that it's an impediment from the journey and it is stopping me from consistency. When the thought of the comfort that we experience in the bodily realm comes to our mind, we need to convince ourselves that I am on a journey. It is a timed journey. I don't know when the time will elapse. I need to get to my destination. So, away with these thoughts of comfort. When we are in difficult relationships and they seem to get the better of us, make us angry, we become abusive. At this point now, we need to remind ourselves that, okay, I've done this all too often. Every time I've made a move forward, this has happened to me. I need to now, this time, not look at it in the same way that I used to previously. Just be quiet, just be calm, just bear, not react, and persevere. And what's more, not internalize and not constantly think about it, so that I may not reverse in my journey. Forgive, forget, breathe again, fight on. That's the sort of attitude we need to incorporate when we try to become generous in the way of God. Initially, it might be easy. Later on, when we don't have as much, the thought might come into our minds, but I've given enough and I can't give any more. At that point, then, to convince the mind that my journey is towards God, this insecurity is a baggage. I need to cast it aside, give more, rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When an opportunity comes to lie, to remind ourselves that I will not lie, I need to move forward. Even if I'm habituated to lying, I need to get rid of it. Speak the truth and not secure that quick benefit that I can by lying. Now, the masters explain that this has to become a disposition of the soul. This motion has to become a disposition of the soul. What that means is that righteous deeds have to flow naturally from within us. We need to become habituated with righteousness. So, what they say here is that we are always within the folds of habits. The negative habits are the things that are holding us back. We can start chipping away at them and retrain our minds. And in place of a negative habit, we can instill a positive habit. So, for example, whenever there's an opportunity of giving and we feel this love for money, give so that we begin to feel the love of giving. Whenever somebody wrongs us and we have this habit of internalizing and hating, have this habit of praying for them and saying, Oh Allah, it was an opportunity from you for me to introspect and see exactly what the impediments are from within. Because whenever we find negativity emerging from within us, if we are conscious of ourselves and we are able to pinpoint the negativity, then that situation that caused the negativity is seen as an opportunity for us to remedy that negative aspect of our personality. So the masters say at the outset of the journey, we need to habituate ourselves with good qualities. They have to become inner dispositions. Now, on that note, the hadith says that whenever you sneeze, say, Alhamdulillah, inni amantu bi rabbikum fasma'un. Say it to an extent that it becomes a habit or a disposition. What happens is that on the day of Qiyamah, when you are raised in the presence of God, when you are ensouled again, or when the spirit is reinstilled within the body and the ensoulment occurs, you will awaken with a sneeze. And since saying Alhamdulillah, inni amantu bi rabbikum fasma'un has become a habit or a disposition, inadvertently you will say it. And the angels will be well impressed and they will say to God, He is proclaiming faith in you as he awakens from his grave, or she is. And God will say, Well, lead them to paradise in that case. I mean, it's just an incentive from the hadith for us to adopt good habits. Now, what they mean here is that when somebody wrongs us, for us to forgive should become a spontaneous act. It should become a disposition of the soul. When difficulties befall us, to say Alhamdulillah becomes spontaneous within our souls. When an opportunity comes to give spontaneously, not with a struggle. If we can bring about that disposition of righteous deeds, then that is where we need to be, because then that will allow Iman or faith or that objective to become solidified and crystallized within our souls. And God will begin to emerge through our beings. Anything less than that can lead to a regressive trend that we move forward, then we stop, we move backwards, and before we know it, this circular motion becomes a habit and a disposition of the soul. And we find, in most of us, we find this particular problem that we resolve to do something good, we do it for 2 days, then we slip back, and then we become disappointed with ourselves, and it continues for the rest of our lives, and we never make it through the first part of the journey or the first hurdle is not crossed. So, what we need here is absolute resolve to make good dispositions a quality of our souls. So, inadvertently, we are responding and interacting in a befitting manner so that the journey may continue. Now, one final note: the masters often caution us against habits, but that is to be understood at a later date. At this stage of journey, habits are very necessary to form good habits. They only become impediments and counterproductive when they bring about a robotic sense of existence. That is something we need to address afterwards. But for now, these habits, the good habits, have to replace bad habits, and we have to do it consciously. Before we can arrive at forming of good habit, the masters say that any motion towards God and faith is next to useless, because it'll just remain as notional idea that I have to get to God, and there is no substantive motion from within. So forming good habits to the extent that goodness becomes a disposition of the soul is integral to spiritually journeying towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I leave us with this final example, that this is what they explain, that even if a person is threatened to be cut piece by piece, the goodness is so firmly embedded within the soul that they can be cut piece by piece, but they will not lose their inner quality. It needs to come to that extent before wayfaring becomes productive. I'll stop there. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.